Everybody, thank you for joining us today. And today we are going to bring in another guest in our series, Choose Your Path. That's right, we are going into graded card buying and selling. And this is going to have Nick from Retrospect joining us today. Nick, would you like to do a quick introduction of yourself?
Sure, man. Thanks for having me on. Like you said, I'm Nick. I have a little channel called Retrospects, and yeah, I'm excited to be here. So this will be a good series. I saw your episode with Dan, so I think this is good, valuable information for people.
Yeah, and I mean, that's the purpose of this interviews are just to give a perspective from each kind of niche market inside of the Pokemon TCG or any TCG in that matter. Some of us don't just pertain to Pokemon, but it does basically go for a lot of the different TCGs in that fact. So it's to give everybody just a perspective from the eyes of some of the people that are in these niche markets. And we're going to go through quite a few of them, and as people keep adding, I keep finding more people that want to do this now. So it's getting to be a lot of fun just rolling into the next person, and it's an enjoyable series. It actually has got some really good information. And once again, we're going to go through a series of 8 questions. I'm trying to keep them all consistent so that when we're going through it, some are added, some are removed based on the hobby. But we're kind of keep some consistency moving forward so that everybody kind of can get the same perspective from everybody in a similar fashion. So, ready to go through these questions? All right, so we're going to go ahead and just get started on these 8 questions that we have to just get going. And of course, more may come up. The discussion can move on to different things as we're going forward. So we're just going to get going on these. You ready to go?
Let's do it.
All right. So the first question that I have that I ask is, what do you currently do, or what did you currently do before getting into buying and selling graded cards?
So I actually used to flip like vintage clothing. So like Tommy, Polo, Nike, Adidas, like stuff from the 90s. So I've kind of like had an eBay for a little bit. I used to like go to different like vintage shows, go to like Goodwill bins, go digging for stuff. So I've always kind of like been into the flipping, I guess, of vintage things and stuff like that. Currently, like I'm in school pursuing like a finance degree, but I run my own business. I'm like a consultant basically in the cannabis space. So I go around to producers and processors and basically like get their businesses on track. Like I'll do anything from third party contract hire out people for HVAC or train staff or write nutrient schedules. So like just a variety of different things, but basically just go around and kind of like get businesses on track, set them up with retailers, things like that. So
Cool. Sounds like a lot of interesting fun and running around for sure.
yeah, quite the unique job title, I would say, I guess.
Hey, there's a lot of unique ones that are very, very lucrative and really fun to do. So,
Yeah.
next question I got on the list for you is what progression did you make in the Pokemon before focusing on graded cards? And that could be on any TCG before going into graded.
Yeah, so I used to like I started with raw like I think most people do. So I was like buying binders and collections and things like that and kind of trying to like break them down, keep certain cards, sell other cards, break even, make some profit, whatever. But it was just like a lot of work for the amount of money you were getting out of it. It was like a lot of time spent. So I was like, well, I'd rather spend a little more money, less time, make the same amount of profit but do less work. And so that's kind of where like graded cards come in, or just or higher value items, I guess I should say. With raw stuff, I was it was always like 5, 10, 20 to $50 cards. So it's just a lot of like grinding, you know what I mean? Like making $10 here, $20 there, which can be good profit margins and stuff like that. And it's good to do definitely when you're starting out. And some people can make entire businesses out of it, but for me, it just became like really, really tedious for the amount of time I was spending on it. So yeah.
Yeah, and I mean that's what we do say a lot of times too, is if you are starting in a hobby or any kind of thing like this, sometimes it's better to take the cheaper paths just to get your bearings and kind of figure things out. Like I said, I think in the series you're going to hear a lot of us just kind of starting with basic, buying collections, selling collections, and then we start branching out into different perspectives of the Pokemon TCG or any TCG. Myself, I've been branching out into different ones now too. But the graded is, like you said, a more expensive avenue, and sometimes it's a more competitive, or you have to have the right people in line in order to be successful at it. So that's probably the trickier part of the graded part, is trying to get the eye to understand if you are grading the cards yourself, to know you're going to get a successful grade on these cards, or if you're just buying and trading and flipping graded cards, you know, have to have the right markets, or even eBay using it as your market, or understand the prices that you're going to have in order to be successful at those.
Well, and I think starting with lots too, like starting with breaking down lots, it provides a good skill because it's important to know how to like snap value lots. And that could be like Craigslist, eBay, if you're at a local card show, whatever. Like it's an important skill to be able to kind of quickly assess when you're looking at like a lot of, let's say, 100 cards. Okay, I should be paying around, if I can get this for 400, I could probably flip this for like 650, 700 relative, you know, there's enough meat on the bone there. Like it's an important skill to know. And then you're going to take that into grading too, right? Because if you're buying a mint card with the idea that you're going to grade it, you need to be thinking, okay, I'm in the card for 20. I need to grade it at the 30 tier. So now I'm in at 50. Let's call it 60 after shipping and all that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then what can I sell it for? If it tens, I'm making X, you know, percentage or multiple.
Yeah.
But if it nines, am I losing money? Am I breaking even? What, you know what I mean? So you need to be able to kind of have those skills, and starting with like breaking down lots and doing things like that can teach you how to like quickly make value assessments and judgments so that you don't overpay for things, and that you leave yourself like enough meat on the bone to where there's a margin of error that you can make without like, you know, losing your butt on a buy, right? So
Yeah, and I mean that's a big thing that we even talk about here, even when you're talking singles and purchasing those, but even going for graded cards. If I'm taking a single and grading it, and I even said that on the channel, if I'm going for grading, I'm trying to be sure that I don't just need to get a 10 in order to be profitable, or at least break even on that card. If I want to send a card in for grading with the cost of grading, shipping, and everything else, I know I have to at least hit a 9 or better, or an 8 or better, in order to be safe. I mean, if you're just banking on that 10 as your business plan, and you're sending all these cards out hoping to get 10s on everything to be profitable, you're going to find yourself getting squeezed pretty hard and hoping that you hit that big 10 somewhere in order to make up some difference. While if you look at the market, you look at what's popular, and you understand that, hey, if I get an 8 on this, at least I'm breaking even. If I get a 9, I'm making 10% profit, but if I get that 10, I'm making 40% profit to 50% profit on that. That's always how I kind of look at it when I'm looking at these cards, is that I like to see at least that, personally, see that 8 have break even, and then everything above that actually making me a little bit of profit just for the safety margins. Now, when I've done graded, I haven't done graded, I'm not going to lie, since PSA went really expensive. I was doing it back in 2019-20, but that's really what I was looking for that break even point.
yeah, absolutely. I think it will, dude. I think you have time. 22 is not going to be the lowest they ever go, so you'll be okay.
Yeah. And I don't think any time it's going to be completely flat. I think that, you know, if you wait it out, or even in overtime, graded's always been fairly successful. Just because what happens is a lot of times people start moving out of graded cards as they become unprofitable. So then there's less people in them, and then eventually they start to go up in price again because there's less people grading. So then there's less available. It's just a reciprocating cycle that we've seen this over and over and over again since 2000, even 99. I mean, we've seen this cycle. Back when you had to go to the LGS or your local card store and take your cards, and they would submit them in a bulk submission at the card store and call you when they came back. Yeah, that's how old I am, just so you know. We didn't do this on the internet. You actually had to pen and paper this stuff. So, yeah. Any other thoughts on the graded card stuff, or how you became focused on graded cards?
I also think it's like kind of cool. Like it's kind of a hunt, right? To like find something super mint, especially if it's vintage. I mean, you know, some of the modern stuff has chase, I guess, when it comes to condition rarity, just because they were printing a lot of it, trying to keep up with demand. And so like even the modern sets weren't always like coming out super high quality. There was whitening, lips, OC, all that kind of stuff. But for the most part, like it just feels kind of cool to be able to source vintage cards and grade a high grade on that. It's like, dang, after 20 years, I was still able to find this and put it in a PSA 10 case. Like that Indiana Jones kind of like hunt, I guess, about it that is that's fun to me, I guess. And
Mhm.
people might get that same feeling out of like filling a hole in a binder collection or something like that. Just that sort of like that chase, I guess, is
Mhm.
really what drives people. So
Yeah, and I mean that's just it, and that's where we also talk about in hobby with gambling feeling too. You're always taking that gamble to hope they fill that gap or get that PSA 10 or get that chase card that you've been trying to get forever, and using it in a business aspect can be good in some ways as long as you understand that you're not gambling and taking proper risks for it. Like you said, you could shoot for that mint, that beautiful card, the perfect gem mint 10 card that you've been looking for, but realize that everything that you're doing is a gamble and to keep your safety nets available for it. I mean, there's ways to do it with safety and being successful at it, of course.
absolutely.
So, all right, next question I got, we're number 3. What length of time did you do this to get where you are in the hobby now?
Probably like 2 years. Like I definitely got back in like 2020. I'm not entirely sure when, but like when I started, it was more just kind of like goofing around, having fun, ripping modern, kind of doing stuff like that. I wasn't taking it too serious. I was interested in the value in the chase cards and things like that, but I wasn't right out the gate like I'm gonna make this a business or right out the gate buying cards to grade or anything like that. I was just kind of like having fun, learning, watching YouTube, whatever, and rediscovering childhood or whatever, like most people. And so it took me a while to kind of like learn that like spending all your money on booster boxes and I mean, dude, I remember like to put it in perspective, like the first week I got back in, I got one of those Shining Fates Pikachu like 4-pack blistered, the Pikachu V
Oh,
Shining.
yep.
Anyways, I pulled the Charizard, right? And at that time it was selling for $600 raw. And the point I was at in the market or just my knowledge, I pulled the card, saw that it was selling for 600 on eBay, and I was like, oh, this is just gonna keep going up. Like I have to hold on to this. Like, because I had no idea, I had no
Yeah.
experience. So I held on to that card, and of course it dropped to like 250, 225 or something like
Hmm.
that, right? And so you have these learning experiences and you can like listen to people tell you things, but sometimes like you need to experience things yourself to really understand how the market works. um and so even if you get burned, like I would say, like if people are feeling like, oh, maybe I'm dumb or whatever, it's like, dude, everybody has gotten burned, everybody has gotten burned
Yeah.
at some point, everybody's made a bad buy. It just happens and you learn from it, you know what I mean? Like you shouldn't get too down on yourself about it because everybody's done it, and
Yeah.
that's kind of how you have to learn and get your bearings or whatever when you come back into the hobby. So
Yeah. And, and it's happened to every one of us. I think that's the number one thing that you learn on the learning curve. Yeah, 2019, I did the exact same things. I pulled the Reshiram Charizard from Unbroken Bonds. Sweet card, awesome. When it came out, even that one, back then, $40. It was like $53 at the time, which was crazy expensive for a card back in 2019 to pull that straight out of a pack like that. So it's like, like you said, you sit there, you got, yes, I got this card. I'm going to hold on to this thing, and it's going to be $100 in the next couple years. And at the time, before the boom, that card actually dropped, like you said. The set came out, the set came, more and more of them came available. And then eventually they were like $15 to $18 for the card. And it's like, I thought this was going to go up. And it's like, that's when you realize that, yeah, I hit the chase card right off the bat when it's going. It's like, sell it. And even my wife sits there and goes, "Well, didn't you want that card?" Yeah, but I said if I sell it now, it'll go down 50%, 60% here in the next 3 months, 4 months, and I'll just buy it back when I get, make that $30, $40 or a couple $100 on it right away off the bat. Why not? It's not. I want the card. I get it. I pulled the card. Great, but I can always purchase it back as the set matures, as the set goes out of hype and FOMO, the prices drop. I mean, even look at the Brilliant Stars. I always use a perfect example. The Alt Art Charizard. When that thing came out, it was what, pushing almost $300 at one point there, 280, 290 it was up to roughly. I'm going off memory, and now I think you can get it for about 170 bucks, $150. So, I mean,
Yeah,
it's almost
maybe even
dropped.
cheaper than that. Yeah.
I think I've seen some sales all the way down to 126, but I think it's averaging out about that 150 range. So still, I mean, that's half. You're 50% down on the price since the release of Brilliant Stars. So once again, if you pulled it at the beginning, sell it, you could have bought it back and still made, roughly $100, $120 on the transaction in between, which is, when you're trying to build accounts and build your reputation too, it's great for you for when you're selling these things, because then people start watching your accounts for these cards to come through also. So definitely some things to consider when you're working even on graded or any of this stuff. Next question I got for you tonight is, what was the final deciding factor for you to start focusing on graded cards? What was the final thing that just made you say graded cards was my niche?
Honestly, I think probably getting a couple of good PSA returns back, because it kind of and I mean, you can do this with raw too, but it creates this compounding effect. Like your first PSA sub, you send like 30 to 50 cards or something, right? You
Yep.
get it back. If you do well, you turn around, you sell them, and then your next sub is like 100 cards, and then you sell the and so on and so forth. And so it just kind of like it keeps compounding, but it feel like I said, man, it's just chase, and it feels good when you grade tens. Like I don't know, it's fun, man, and like you said about the gambling, it almost is like its own form of gambling, because obviously like there's standards, and if the card's clean and well centered, it's probably got a good shot at getting a 10. But
Mm-hmm.
in some cases, like it is just a coin flip 50-50 between it getting a 9 and a 10, and that could be like a massive difference in the end value that you can sell it for. So there is, I guess, like an aspect of gambling there. So I'm sure there's a dopamine rush when you get
Oh, yeah.
your PSA great grades in or whatever, and you can look and you can see what you got tens on and stuff like that. Like I'm sure, because and then there's financial value attached to it, which has got to make you feel good a little bit too. But it's just fun, man. Like I said, it's cool to be able to still find things in perfect condition, um, 20 years later or something. And yeah, like a lot of the stuff was printed, but it's not as easy as 2019, to find mint cards consistently anymore. Like back then, if I was in the hobby, if I knew what I knew now, I'm sure I would have probably done pretty good, because there was just a lot more of it. Now that like everybody knows it's valuable, it's harder to find really minty stuff, because either the person now knows that they can grade it, or somebody that is savvy has already gotten to that person. You know what I mean? So
Yep.
yeah, it's a little bit tougher now, I would think, to find minty stuff that'll still hit those nines and tens. But
Yeah. And I even talked in Dan's interview. If we go back to that one, that was a question I asked him: is how easy or how much more difficult is it to find those collections at a reasonable price? Because everybody now is going to sell their collection. They go to TCG Player and they want to get TCG Player pricing on it. And it's like, if you want TCG Player, and even Dan said, if you want TCG Player's pricing, you need to sell it yourself. I mean, we're not going to sit here and buy collections from you at that pricing. And I find it very difficult to get people off of that, because now everybody just jumps on. TCG Players got that nice little scan tool. They sit there and they scan all their cards. And at TCG Player, of course, they put them all in there at near mint condition, which, mint vintage cards realistically are probably not that good of, condition. They're probably lightly played, most people's cards. But they're trying to get that near mint condition quality or price, and it's like, it's just getting more and more difficult. I think it definitely, even in the singles market, buying collections, it's really difficult to find those minty cards, those perfect condition cards that even myself, I'm like, yeah, I should get that graded. I think that'll get me a 9 or a 10 on this card. Even at this point, it's like, if I can get a 9 on this card, I'm doing good on a lot of these vintage. And when you can find it, like you said, it's Indiana Jones. style. Ooh, I got one. This one's got to get in there right away, type deal. And it doesn't happen very often anymore, and it's getting to be more and more difficult. And I think as new people, we're still getting new people in this hobby. We're still getting new aspects of this, and as that continues, we're going to find it more and more difficult as people start spreading off. A lot of people are still in the learning stages, and some people are just ripping packs for fun. But if they get serious about it and start enjoying this hobby more, they're going to start niching down. And it's going to be kind of interesting to see where all these people kind of niche into this market and become part of it.
Another thing I would say too that I really like about grading is it takes the subjectivity out of it. Like with raw cards, it's
Mm-hmm.
everybody's got their own opinion, and you can sit and go back and forth, and you're having to do a lot more work. Like if you're trying to comp a card, it's like, okay, well, this one sold for 50, but this one sold for 20. Is mine
Mm-hmm.
closer condition wise to the 51 or the 21? Okay, so maybe I should price it at four. Like you don't have to do that with
Yeah.
graded. It's like, here's what the last 10 sold for. I can either try to set it directly for that, or I could try to be lowest on eBay. Like those are your options. You know what I mean? But it
Mm-hmm.
takes the subjectivity out of it. It's just less BS, I guess. Like for both you and the end consumer, you don't have to go back and forth, and they know what they're getting, you know what you're selling them, and the market just kind of sets that agreed upon price. Um, so I like that because a lot of the time, like I said, with raw stuff, like you just go back and forth for infinity, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I mean the. I'm always I'm pretty strict. Like I would say I've even like loosened my standards a little bit because I've pre-graded cards super harshly that ended up getting tens, and I was just like, okay, I need to relax. But I would say just like as advice for people selling raw cards, like you said, everybody wants to put it as near mint. And in your mind, it might be like, well, I should list my stuff as near mint because that's how I get the most value out of it. But if you're trying to do this for any sort of like extended time, it's better on you to just be honest. If the
Mm-hmm.
card's light play, call it light play. If it's medium heavy play, just call it that and just be honest with people. You
Yep.
might take a little less now, but you being an honest, reliable business is going to pay off way more than you trying to charge more on a couple cards just because you want to list them as near mint when you know that they're not. You know what I mean? So I don't know. That's something to consider. I feel like for people that sell raw too, is just be honest, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't
Yeah.
know.
And that's the problem is that I even see that, and I've said that on videos because I see it quite a few times that there's a big discrepancy on the word near mint when it comes to grading. And there's actually some of my comments on one of the videos I said that don't give it a graded number because near mint is anywhere from 7 to 10. It's near mint 7, near mint 8. That near mint is actually a huge window. And that's why that's why I've even said in videos, don't try and put a grade on it. But if you've got a card with hardly any scratches, little whitening, very little whitening, and the centering's good, you can always list that as a near mint card. But don't say this is going to be a PSA 10 near mint, or get away from that kind of thing. And like you said, if I've got scratches on hollow, I can see visible scratches on the hollow. The back has got some whitening, and there's some whitening on the edges. I will just say lightly played or moderately played, just depending on the amount of damage. Because like you said, it's all about reputation in this industry. And the further that we get away from the boom of 2020, the more your reputation is going to be more important than the actual cards you have. People will be more comfortable purchasing from you if you're honest, saying it's lightly played, than saying it's a near mint or a perfect card and it's not. And then you get them bad hits, and then people start watching that. And as we get further and further away, people are going to start focusing more on those reviews. So if you start getting people reviewing, going, you know, this was moderately played, not near mint, he's over advertising, them will be just damning to you in the long run when it comes down to it for that fact.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, last thing I'll say is like that's the first thing I look for. Like if I'm buying from a TCG player seller and I'm trying to like get some, I don't buy Pokemon, but like other modern TCGs, like stuff like Final Fantasy and sometimes Yu-Gi-Oh. I'll buy
Mm-hmm.
off there. It's a grade because the print quality is good, or Dragon Ball Super or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll go to this, like I'll find the cards I want, put them in my cart, and then I'll go to each seller that's selling the cards I want, and I'll check their reviews. And if I'll go to the negatives and I'll see like what people are leaving negative for. And if it's like shipping was a little late or whatever, it's like, all right, whatever. But if all the negative reviews are like card was listed as near mint but came with a dent or scratches, or then I don't
Right.
buy from that seller, because it's like, okay, well, but again, if it's just like a shipping time thing or whatever, it's like
You
I don't
can't
really
control
care.
that.
Yeah, like I'm chilling off of a few days extra or whatever if the cards are actually mint, you
Hmm.
know what I mean? So like you said, reviews matter, the reputation matters.
And it really will. I mean, a lot of people are still getting away with not worrying about the reputation. But the more this market cools, and then once again, we got to look at the economy in general. If that starts to cool even more to where people are getting even tighter on money, they don't want to potentially buy garbage. They're gonna go to a source that's 5 star, and like you said, if even myself, if it's shipping it, well, they shipped it and it didn't show up, for 2 weeks. Well, that don't bother me as long as the card came in the quality it was supposed to. I'm not in any rush on my end to get these things in. If it waits another 2 week or two, whatever, it's not a big deal. But if you're going to sit there and put it in, like you said, you start seeing those ones. These cards are moderately played or lightly played, and they were listing as near mint, 1 star. It's like, yeah, you're just trying to your reputation's getting tarnished because I don't trust that even if it's a 10% chance you're going to send me garbage. It's like at this price, I can't take the risk of it being bad. So, and it's going to be really important. So I would say anybody that's joining this hobby, raw, graded, anything, be honest. Honesty is going to get you a lot further in this. You may lose a few bucks, but it'll get you a lot further in the long run. So, next question I got here is, now this one's a little bit more difficult. I know it's hard to quantify sometimes because when you talk to people, yeah, today I made in graded cards or even raw. Today I made $1,000, but yesterday I made nothing. So the biggest thing is I'm trying to get out of this question is that to estimate the amount of hours you work to the income that you make per month. So if you had to just kind of put a relative time, if I worked 20 hours this month, I made $50 type deal. And that's why I try to break it out in a month. It can sometimes average out so you can get an idea. But some months are better than other. I mean, I know that, but it's just a relative question.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's tough too because it's like when you're doing something you really enjoy, it's like, well, what's work? But to me, I even consider like all, because I feel like every day or almost every day, like I'm listening to some sort of podcast, card content, whether it's like sports, Pokemon, you get whatever, and I enjoy that. But I might listen to like a 2.5 hour podcast and hear like one thing about this guy's talking about this set that has this new chase card rarity or what, and then I start looking at, you know what I mean? And so like
Mm-hmm.
that's valuable, but I just spent 2.5 hours. And then how can I quantify that as far as like how much money am I going to make off that information? You know what I mean? So it's tough. Like I just go on eBay. I would say like on all platforms cumulatively, like I'm on track to do like 6 figures gross. Net, it's hard because like I'm still waiting for stuff to come back from PSA,
Yeah.
but I would not say it's, I don't know, man, like honestly it's probably like minimum wage or something when you really break it down to like the hourly type deal. Because I, again, like I'm really engaged and I spend a lot of time listening to YouTube channels and podcasts and things like that. So even if I'm not working like right, printing a shipping label or listing something on eBay or whatever, like I'm still absorbing knowledge, constantly learning, constantly trying to stay engaged and stay on top of things, because if you don't, like you're gonna fall behind. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's, yeah, it's tough.
It's a tough question. And, the reason I'm trying to ask it is just to give someone new in the hobby, if they're trying to pick this as their niche, you know, okay, I want to know roughly what I'm going to make. So, like, if I'm going to go work for an HVAC business or if I'm going to go work for selling cattle, yeah, there's some variability in there. But realistically, I know per year or per month that I'm going to make roughly this much money for working a 40-hour week. I'm going to make this much. Or, but for example, myself in the hobby, I kind of was figuring the numbers out before I did this, and I relatively in actually selling and focusing on it when I can. If I can focus, I can make $500 a month, $600 a month pretty easily, and I can work maybe 30, 25 hours, 30 hours right in that range to do so. So just to give you an idea of how much time I'm actually spending, like you said, you actually figure that out, that I'm making $600 for five. That's not a huge amount of money at the end of the day. I mean, it sounds good, but I'm not quantifying either the amount of time I'm sitting here listening to podcasts and then doing my Google searches. I'm just saying that's me spending time on TCG Player. That's me on eBay. That's me putting, products together. That's me packaging and that kind of stuff. That's what I'm looking at. Because, like you said, I gain a lot of knowledge and a lot of direction from listening to podcasts. Just being involved and engaged in the community. There's a lot of directions you can hear from being engaged.
Yeah, I mean, it's just different than having like a regular job because like in order to be competitive, obviously, like you have to stay on top of things, you have to know what's going on, but your success is a function of how much time and energy and effort and like skill, obviously, and maybe some luck too, you're willing to put in. But if you just go work for a company, like if you go to work for McDonald's, you don't need to stay up on like the best, most efficient deep fryer or whatever that saves you X amount per batch or whatever, right? Like your manager or the higher ups at the company, they're going to figure that out for you, right? But when you run your own business, when you're doing your own side hustle, you need to figure out, well, I'm printing out 500 labels a month or whatever. So how much is that costing me with an ink printer? Should I get a thermal printer? Like you need to do that. Like you have to sit and do that
Yeah.
stuff. Whereas with a real job, somebody else is going to do that for you. So you have to be constantly absorbed in like changing things in the industry and new industry standards, new prices on things. Like you don't have to do that when you work for somebody else. A lot of that is taken care of. Like they might do employee stuff to where they train you on new policies or new technology that they're implementing or whatever. But again, like that's all done for you. In this, if you don't do it, like you're going to get left behind and you're not going to be
Mhm.
successful. You almost are working harder running your own business, and that's with anything, not just Pokemon. That's with anything.
Yeah.
You're going to be working harder, but the idea is that you love it, you enjoy your time, you don't have to answer to a
Mhm.
boss. So it's just a trade off.
And the other thing is too is that's what I took, talk to people about too, and they say what you must enjoy running your own business because you get so much free time and so much ability to do things, and it's like, yeah, no, I don't have any free time. Trust me. Between my full time HVAC business and then doing this as a side hustle and the farm, I said it's just funny because it's like, yes, my employees that work for me, they work 8 to 5. They work a total of an 8 hour day and they go home. Some of them have 1 week on call in the wintertime. So that's a deal if you work for an HVAC company. Is you're on call 1 week. And we've got 4 employees. So 1 week a month, you're on call for a week. But realistically, anymore, the amount of calls we make in the middle of the night are very slim to few. And it's like, but if for the business side of things, when you guys go home at 5 o'clock, I'm coming down. I'm doing my estimates. I'm doing my bids. I'm doing my payroll. I'm making sure the insurance is paid. I'm making sure all this stuff is taken care of so that you tomorrow can come back in and have a job and get a paycheck. And you don't even realize that that work is being done if you're doing your own business. And that's just the side part about it. It's the same thing with, even the doing this as a side thing. How many hours do you spend on TCG Player updating prices to be sure that some card didn't shoot and you're sitting here with it at 50 cents when it's going for $3, or that vice versa. You've got a card that you've got listed for $5 and the market dropped and you're still trying to sell it and it's at $3, so you're way out of whack with it. So you're constantly always playing these on all the different platforms, and you spend so much time doing that. Then that's why, like you said, it's hard to quantify how much actual time you get. It's very difficult because you do spend a lot of just, even me, I'm driving someplace or in the work truck going with my brother someplace and he's driving. I'm on TCG Player moving stuff around and he's driving and I don't even count that. It's just I'm doing it while I'm bored, while I'm going between things, and I'm just doing my thing and not even spending thinking much about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and you really have to love it. You really have to enjoy it. And for the average person that might not be trying to dedicate that much time or that much energy to it, that's fine. And I think that you can still make money and enjoy it as a hobby or whatever. But I think it's unrealistic to expect these crazy gains that we're kind of like popularized, and not just collectibles, stocks, crypto, whatever, right? People got so used to like 2, 3, 10, 100xing their money, when in reality a lot of businesses operate on like 10 to 30% margins. You know what I mean? So
Mm-hmm.
I think that people need to temper their expectations. It's very, very possible and reasonable for you to be a average, just chill, relaxed collector. You're collecting the stuff you like, you're making smart buys, you're, watching YouTube channels, whatever. And then when an opportunity comes along because of what you know, you're going to be able to make like a smart buy that you can then break down, make a couple $100s off of, and then maybe keep the nicer cards for yourself so that you're in at like, a cost basis is like that's realistic, right? Like you can do that with 5 to 10 hours a month or something like that. But to make these crazy gains it's just
Mm-hmm.
not realistic, man. It really isn't, So I think people need to kind of like temper their expectations and understand what goes into it. You know what I'm saying? Like you said, sitting in the truck, updating all your prices. Like that's something you have to do if you're going to take
Mm-hmm.
it seriously. You can't be lacking on stuff like that.
No, and you could miss a lot of opportunities, or you could get someone bigger buyer come and buy all your stock and sell it for twice the price right away because you messed up and you didn't catch that price. That card became popular for playability, and all of a sudden it shoots. And that's the biggest thing is that people, you know, I would tell anybody, and one question I was going to put in here, and I'm kind of curious, maybe I should work it back in, is how much work do you think you'd have to do in order to be at about $2,500 a month?
Are you talking about 2,500 profit or gross?
Gross. Gross.
Oh, yeah, gross. Like gross right now, I'm probably doing like across all platforms, I'm probably doing like 10 grand a month gross. But it's a lot of work, dude. Like I have this background going, but behind me is a dining table covered in stuff, like completely disheveled, just covered in crap, dude. It's stressful. It's a lot of work, and the only reason I can even do it at this level is because, like I said, I run the consulting business, so I make my own schedule a lot of the time, and then I'm in school, and a lot of school, over the past couple of years has been online. I've only had to do like a couple classes in person. If
Yep.
I didn't have this time, there's no way I can do this. Absolutely not. Like and I do this. I mean, this is a huge part of my life. You know what I mean? It's not like
Mm-hmm.
I don't wake up and like eat, sleep, breathe Pokemon or whatever, but like turning this into a side hustle business consumes a lot of my time, like a lot of my time. And I
Mm-hmm.
would definitely equate it to like a full-time job for most people. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's a lot of work, man. It's a lot of work for
Mm-hmm.
sure. And yeah, I think people see people like Rusty or Dan or whatever, and it's like, I mean, you don't realize how hard these guys are working. One,
Yeah.
two, their families are probably helping them a little bit behind the scenes with stuff, and three, like they already had massive inventories built up from things that they were accumulating. So you don't see
Yeah.
kind of like all this work that they had to do into building this
Mm-hmm.
massive business that they have now. People only see kind of like the end result and the success and don't
Yeah.
realize you had to take years and years of grinding and working your butt off to get to that point. And that point might not have ever been really accessible if it weren't for the boom. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
yeah, it's I don't know. I just think people need to take everything into account, temper their expectations, and also just realize that people are really working really hard. It's Pokemon, it's cards, it's something that we all love and think is fun, but when it comes to the money side of it, it's work and
Yeah.
it's business just like anything else. It's not playtime and joking around. Like you have to take it serious,
Yeah.
So
Yeah, we like to have fun on these discussions and interviews and lives and stuff, and it is our way to unwind, especially the people that are on YouTube. But yeah, you'd be amazed at the amount of work, how many hours you just sit behind a computer researching. Like me, you could kind of see my little bulk area over here of me going through those and sorting them. But I have a time frame which you have to do it because if I'm too late, I've missed the market because that playability is no longer there. So it's like you're just constantly doing something. Even if I'm sitting here watching lives, and watching the stuff going on YouTube, like you said, grabbing knowledge that I'm listening to, I'm sitting here with bulk cards, just laying them out and digging through. And I've got TCG player up on one screen and live up on the other. And if I find one I don't know, you're looking at it, and it's just a ton of stuff to try and make a little bit of money. And $2,500 even gross per month. It doesn't seem like a lot, but there's still a lot of work in that, depending on the niche. If you're doing raw card
Yeah,
singles, if you're doing
yeah, that's
graded
a
and high end
lot.
graded, yeah, I mean it's a lot of cards. I mean, typically if I'm hitting with 20 hours a week, if I'm hitting $600-700 in a month, with putting in 20-hour weeks, 15-hour weeks in Pokemon, I'm doing good. That's a good month. So just the perspective, and that's just gross. That's not profit.
Yeah, well, in the margins on that stuff, like you're gonna be working harder, but the margins are gonna be like a little bit better. When it comes to like a lot of booster boxes, sometimes the sets do really well, but a lot of the time, people that are selling booster boxes are making like a few dollars or $1 a box after
Yeah.
shipping and fees and everything. You know what I mean? So like, it's not just some get rich quick type. You know what I mean? Like it really isn't. So. 2,500 in raw singles is work, dude. That is real work. That is grinding. So,
That is
yeah.
grinding yourself to death, and I can tell you right now, I'm nowhere near it. And that's probably working 15 hours, maybe pushing 20 hours a week. I'm nowhere near fifteen hundred
Yeah.
dollars a month. Even on the best months, I'm pushing maybe 1,000 on that kind of grind. If I push 20 hours a week for 4 weeks, I could probably get over 1,000 on a grind. But that's it. and,
Yeah.
and
Well,
like you
and
said,
you don't want to resent your work either. You know what I mean? Like you don't want to get to the point to where like you're resentful of what you have to do, or you feel like obligated because you know what I mean? Like there should still be a want to do it. You know what I mean? And if you push yourself too hard, put too much time into it, run yourself ragged, whatever, like you're not going to like it. And it's quickly going to become something that isn't a hobby, isn't a side hustle. It could be
mm-hmm.
like a burden. You know what I mean? You might get resentful about it. So having balance is important, and knowing where your limits are is important for sure. So
Yep. Oh yeah, definitely. Just find your limitations and go with it, and use it as a side hustle. Especially if it is a side hustle. Don't burn yourself out. I mean, even like me, I'll work in the winter months. I have the best opportunity to go like 20-hour weeks on this. It's because it gets slow for us because it's spring breakup. Everything's melting. No, it's warm and cold, so nobody's really doing much. So March, April, you'll see even my YouTube channel. It does really well, like February, end of February, March, and April, because I have time to really focus on this. Because there's nothing in the farm. There's nothing in HVAC. I've got my little bit of free time. That's when I get to get caught up on all my stuff around the house, and I can focus, and then I can really push some digits. But realistically, that's it. And if you don't have that time, if I was trying to do this with my full-time job and push TCG player all the time, I'd get burnt out so quick, and it wouldn't be fun. And then why do this if it's this much work to try and make this much money? It makes no sense. So, and you don't want to get to that point. I think everybody has a limit. Find that limit and just enjoy it. I mean, if you make a few bucks here and there, as long as you're going in the positive direction at some pace, then you're doing good and you're being successful at that point. Um, Next question I have for you is: what is the one mistake you made that you could advise others to avoid in graded cards?
I would say, and this is not just with graded cards. I guess you could apply this to a lot of stuff, but I would
Mm-hmm.
say because it's like a hobby, careful being so focused on what you like and trying to make what you like run the business. When in reality, like that might not always be the case. So careful placing too much value into what you're really into, because you can make bad buys, right? Like if you're not constantly engaged in seeing like sales volume on things, and you're more focused on just like the fundamentals or whatever, then you could get like here's a perfect example. So there's this 10th anniversary or 10th, it might be like it's either 10th anniversary or 10th movie, but it's this Japanese like collection binder. I want to say like PokeNav talked about it a long time ago. It's got like 9 cards in it. It's got a Lugia,
It's
an
a 10
Entei.
year. Yep.
Yeah, yeah, the 10 years. So
Yep.
those cards are not super rare, and you can buy the whole thing for like 30 to 50 if you're getting it from Japan on auction or something like that. Most of them come mint, right? you could look at it and be like, oh, well, like the release is unique, it's a promo, it's a popular Pokemon, whatever, high grade. But if you buy it for the wrong price and don't realize how many people are grading these because of how common these cards are, even if it is a popular Pokemon, you're going to get hammered. And if you're not buying like enough below market, or you're not buying it raw with enough meat on the bone to grade and then sell, like if the card is selling for $100 right now,
Mm-hmm.
and I personally, like in a 10, I would estimate that you're going to get 80 for that card. Like I would not go into thinking that you're going to get full current market price for a card. I always give myself like, a 15 to 20% buffer either way, because this is not stocks. Like these things are not liquid. Price comps fluctuate up and down 10 to 20% on any given day. So you need to be prepared for that. And if you're not leaving enough meat on the bone, you can end up making some bad buys where you're breaking even or you're losing money just because of the time frame, So
Yeah.
yeah, kind of a long-winded answer, but I hope that was that was helpful. So
No, and it makes perfect sense. And I mean, sometimes you like certain things, but just because you like it does not mean that the rest of the market is going to enjoy those. So you really do have to understand what's popular and why they're popular to make some really good choices for anything. I mean, whether it's sealed, you know, whether it's raw, whether it's graded, whether it's any kind of the hobby, you have to understand because let's just be honest, the Golem Hollow is not going to be as popular as a Charizard Hollow at the end of the day. It's just not. I mean, there isn't enough fanfare behind that, and that's where we even had the discussion. Well, why do you make decisions on certain sets on why they're going to be popular? And when the Evolving Skies came out, some of us really banked on that set. We said this set's going to be really popular. And then Fusion Strike came out, and right after that was the next set after Celebrations, and we can't. Well, Fusion Strike's going to be weak. And you were like, well, how do you? I've even had people at LGS. How do you know that? And I said, well, I look at the popular Pokemon in the set. Mew is popular. I mean, Mew has a following behind it. Well, let's be honest, a Mew set by itself, even Pokemon Go is kind of an example of it. Mewtwo by itself never really has enough push to push a set. If popular sets like Unified Minds were popular because Mew and Mewtwo were in it together. When they're both in a set, it makes that said if they would have put Mewtwo in Fusion Strike would have been probably a lot heavier of a set. Do I think it would have been Evolving Skies quality? No, but I think it would have been more like a Brilliant Stars, possibly even Vivid Voltage when it came out, Shining Fates quality. I don't think it would be on the bottom where it is now with Fusion Strike. But you knew Evolving Skies is going to be huge because, hey, you got Rayquaza. Rayquaza's got a huge following with not just people in, it's like Charizard. It's not just people in the hobby. You'd be amazed how many people that have no interest in Pokemon love Rayquaza and Charizard because they're dragons. People have this dragon fetish too. I've gone to people that have dragon collections and they have a Charizard or they have a Rayquaza statue inside of it. It's like, why? Well, because it's a dragon. Okay, well, I can get it. I could get behind that. But then you got all the evolutions. And evolutions are huge. They're an extremely popular line. Eevee's cool because Eevee can become 8 different characters by just changing its evolution. And those are the things that really make a big difference in a set and how you could really just understand why that's popular and why that's not going to be popular. It's the same thing with graded cards. Why is this card popular? Why is this one going to not be? And if you can start to decipher that.
yeah, and it seems like to some people, maybe sometimes it can seem like too obvious or something, like Brilliant Stars, right? Or Evolving Sky. People are like, oh, well, it's obvious, but like, I don't know. To me, and maybe this is a hot take, but to me, it's a lot easier now after things have like retraced. Like, it's pretty easy. I'm not saying like in an investment sense to time the market. It's pretty obvious when people are hot on a set. You know what I mean? It's pretty obvious when like the market's really excited about something. It's pretty obvious when like the chase cards are doing well. It's a popular Pokemon, like you said. It just I don't want to sound condescending or anything by saying it's obvious, but like it is pretty obvious if you're watching Pokemon YouTube, like you can tell what people like and what people don't like, and like what sets are really popular. Now, is that going to be the best? Who knows? But even if you like this set over here and you see value in it at like $85, like maybe it'll do great or whatever. But like your money might be better spent paying $20 more to just buy the set with a Charizard in it. Like if you're like, well, I can get Chilling Reign and Battle Styles for distributor prices, or it's like maybe, and like I could be completely proven wrong, and you see better percentage gains, but you already know people really like Brilliant Stars and Evolving Skies. So, like,
Yep.
is it maybe better to just spend up a little bit for booster box, maybe spend $10 or $15 more, but you're getting something that's like, I don't want to say more proven, but it's just like, it's people really, really, really like it. You don't have to
Yep.
speculate on demand. Like, demand is already there. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And that's just it. I mean, and it's hard to say because I always try and think back to 2019 learning this stuff. Nowadays you can see a set and I can almost just look at the set list or just the first like big card accidental leaks that come out, and you can almost look at it going, this set's gonna be all right. I mean, it's not gonna fly off the shelves. It's not gonna be Astral Radiance being one of them. You looked at the set cards and people are like, well, how do you know that this set's gonna? It's like, yeah, but look at the leaked cards. I mean, you look at what's potentially coming inside of this set, and then when you see the Japanese release, and that's the biggest thing too that I really watch at with set releases is watch the Japanese reaction to it. That's the nice thing about actually in English. A lot of people hate that we have these late releases, but I kind of like the late releases sometimes because you can see how people are reacting to the Japanese version of these sets and the sets beforehand, and you can say you knew Evolving Skies was going to be big, and it wasn't because you knew evolutions and stuff like that, but you could watch the reaction to Eevee Heroes. Eevee Heroes was I just obliterated the second that stuff came out, and once again, Japan loved it. Even America in English were sucking up Eevee Heroes as fast as you could get it. It was chewed up incredibly fast and went extremely expensive really fast. And it all came down to the evolutions, and people love evolutions. It's a great character set. That's a good key in English, whether or not you should jump into something, or whether or not there's an investment opportunity in that set in the English versions is buy that Japanese. So I spend a lot of time personally watching Japanese sets and how they release and how well they go out. And it's a good cue.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And like, same thing with there's a One Piece TCG that's coming out, and in Japan, it's done really, really
Yep.
well. And like the chase card is like $500-$600, something crazy. And like kind of like you said, it's a queue leading up to. It's like, well, is this big in Japan? Obviously, it's an anime or whatever, but it's big in America. You know what I mean? And so I can see it doing similar things because of its success in Japan. And moving
Yeah.
forward, I think the sets will do the same thing where it'll come out in Japan first, then they'll release it in English, so you can kind of track and see, is the market still interested? Are the chase cards still really valuable?
Yep.
So I agree with you. I think that's important.
Yep. It's just a little foresight. I mean, and granted, that doesn't always translate. It's not a 100% guarantee, but it's a very good indicator. You can really get a good indication for where it's going based on the Japanese sets prior to them coming to English. So once again, it's just cues. And these are things that if you're in this hobby, and I'll tell anybody, when you start into here, you're not going to understand all the cues. There's a lot of cues sitting around for, like you said, something that's an easy investment and seems really easy, but when you're new to the hobby, you may not see it. You may be questioning it, and like you said, sometimes you question yourself a lot. That's too easy. That's too stupid easy for it to be sitting there. That, like, one of them I always say is UPC. A lot of people were like, you start questioning whether or not it's going to be as big as you are, because it's like, it's celebrations. It's this big ticket item, the $120 box. Is it really going to be, or are they going to trick, Pokemon likes to trick you too. Well, here you go. Here's 100,000 of these. Oh, they did really well. Okay, well, here's 2 million of them. And then pretty soon they're everywhere after you spent $250 on it. That's another thing. There's a lot of things that you got to be really careful about and speculative, but as you get further into this hobby, the more time you spend in it, the longer amounts of times you start doing research and watching things, you start picking up. And like you said, things almost seem too easy, and then you start questioning yourself on, am I seeing this wrong? It just seems too silly for it to be like that. So, all right, next question I got for you is number one most important thing to consider when selling and trading graded cards. And the best way I can describe this question, just to give you a little bit better on it, is do you want a good following? Do you want a good community? Do you want, networking? What's probably the best thing that you can do to be successful in this hobby?
I would say, I would say like, I mean, it's kind of recycling a little bit, but the reputation is important. Like, I know you sell on TCG Player. I don't know if you do a lot on eBay, but it's the same sort of thing. Like your reputation is everything as a seller. Um, so making things right, just being honest, like going above and beyond to make sure that things are handled correctly, because at the end of the day, like it's your reputation and it's your business, and you could have good stuff, but if people don't feel comfortable buying from you, I mean, I can't tell you how many times a zero account or a five feedback account has popped up with a card that I want, but I'm like, ooh, and I feel a little like
Yeah.
unsure about buying from them. The seller isn't responsive, won't send me back pictures, you know what I mean? So like
Yeah.
all that stuff seems like little and seems obvious, but it's really not, and it all matters and builds up into you having a good reputation and name as a business, So uh yeah, just maintaining high feedback on eBay, I think is really important. I also think it's important to like manage inventory well and not spread yourself too thin. I've tend to do this because I like a lot of different stuff. I like Yu-Gi-Oh! I like Dragon Ball. I like Pokemon. And sometimes if you spread yourself a little too thin, you might not always make the best buys, because your collector brain or your hobbyist brain takes over a little bit. You know what I mean? So I would just say like kind of like you were saying earlier, like niching down, focusing, finding what you understand, what you're good at, and just kind of like trying to stay in that lane and become you don't want to be like a jack of all trades, master of none kind of deal. You know what I mean? Like you really want to get good at like your craft and your little area.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, so long-winded answer again, but
Well, and it's fine. I mean, that's just that. I mean, that's what this is for, is to just give you your perspective on it. And long-winded answers are great because sometimes it gets your full thought process out there. But I agree. The biggest thing is that that's why I tell people, even newer into the stuff, into the hobby, is the faster you can niche down, the faster you can get into something, and you don't have to stay there. Even myself, I niched down really good into sealed product when I first in about early 2020 because that's where the market was. It was I could find product, I got into things. You niche down in it, you understand it extremely well. And then I started breaking out into niching, going into the raw cards because I saw more lucrative potentials, maybe some quicker turnaround than on the sealed side. But just because you make those little bit of a changes and adjustments doesn't mean that you need to focus on you niching down into one thing. Doesn't mean you need to stay there. You can niche down into the next thing and become really good at that and still keep the knowledge of the previous one. But like you said, you don't want to sit there and spread out and try and do to be successful. You don't want to be doing sealed, raw, graded. Okay, now I'm going to do this in Dragon Ball Z, Yu-Gi-Oh, Magic. You could go through MetaZoo and all these other sets, and it's like pretty soon you're just overwhelmed and you're lost. You don't know, you don't remember what's happening here and here and here and here. You know, it just gets to be too confusing. So even like myself, I'm really niche down in Pokemon. That's what I do. That's what I'm good at. You can ask me a lot of pricing on stuff because I'm always on TCG Player. I could tell you pretty close to pricing of current items, but I'm starting to play with Dragon Ball Z. It doesn't mean that I'm going full fledged into Dragon Ball Z. It's just a little bit more different, a little bit more fun. but I'm not trying to niche on. I'm keeping my base with this and doing a little bit extra on the side.
Dipping your toes in a little bit. And
Yeah.
I don't have any Pokemon sealed at all. You know what I mean? Because it's not my lane. Like I'm sure that there's boxes out there or products that are out there that are a good value and probably a good hold, but it's not what I do. You know what I mean? And so even though I'm pretty engaged and I still, I still know what's going on with modern and stuff like that, I am not as knowledgeable on what the best products are, like where my money is best spent as far as like sealed goes. It's just not my, so I'm not going to go to try to do that. I know there's probably money to be made over there, but that money is for somebody else to make. You know what I mean? That's not
Yeah.
my niche, right? So that's not where I have seen success. So yeah, and
Yeah.
that's okay. Like everybody can have their own way of making money, right? For some people it can be singles, some people it can be slabs, and some people might do really good at sealed. Like everybody can kind of have their own way of doing it and see success in a variety of ways. So
Yeah, exactly. And that's just it. I mean, you can dabble in anything you want, but it's to me it's really important to find your niche, find that thing you're knowledgeable at, stay to that, and then you can go and deviate a little bit and have some fun. It kind of gives you a basis to where you could just fall back to, and your safe place, where your consistency's coming from, and then you can try and learn a little bit more. Like you said, you don't want to be a jack of all trades and a master of none. You want to really be a master of one, and then spread out and just do small things outside of that. And even if it's relative, I mean, sometimes, like I said, you can become good at raw cards and really know raw cards extremely well. And then you could start doing that little side branch that kind of runs parallel to it where you could start doing grading. Okay, I understand raw extremely well, and this is a very clean card, and I know that. Why don't I send that one out for grading and see how it does? Let's see how that performs. And that way you get that reassurance that you know what you're talking about too. It kind of gives you back that affirmative. Yeah, I can understand this card good enough. And yeah, I figured it'd come back a 9. And sure enough, it came back a 9. It didn't come back a 7 when I'm thinking it's going to come back a 9. I mean, it's just that, reassured part of the hobby. So, all right, we finally made it. We're all the way down to the last question for tonight, which is going to be knowing what you do now. Would you still focus on graded cards, or would you change your direction?
I think I would still focus on graded cards, but I'm currently like working on this, but I think that a more sustainable, like long term type deal would be just to like get in with a distributor, to get modern I just feel like it's something you need to do, and it is going to provide you a lot of opportunity to like grow and scale your business. So I would just say that that's something that I'm definitely like looking at and interested in and trying
Yeah.
to move towards, because I know that that's an opportunity and an avenue that you need to take to kind of scale in this space. So um, yeah, and like I kind of said in the last question too, like there's other ways to make money. Like like Evolving Skies, dude. Like you know, if you would have bought cases of that at like $95, like you'd be crushing it right now. You know what I
Yep.
mean? And the amount of work you would have had to put in is like minimal, right? Like you just buy cases, you stick them in your closet, you wait, it stonks. And obviously, like no one can guarantee that, right? But it's
No.
just the amount of work and time and effort you have to put in for that. There's money to be made there, and somebody's making that money there. So just be open, and again, like not everybody has to do the same thing. There's all sorts of different ways to make money. So finding what makes sense for you, finding what you're best at. Um, you might find that you have a really good intuition for modern steel, and you kill it in that, or like you said, you might be discerning, good at looking at a card and being like, hey, I see this as a 9, or I see this as a 10 or whatever, and you're getting that affirmation back from PSA because you're getting good grades. It just depends. So like you said, niche down, find what you're good at, find what makes sense to you, and just like focus on that. You know what I mean? Focus on your strengths more than, trying to fix your weaknesses, I guess. So,
Yep, exactly. And I can't say it any better. You're right on it. I think that that's probably one of the most important things is just get your strengths and use them. If you want to branch out, try it. I mean, you might find out that you would really enjoy doing something different. But once again, you can become successful at least at this, what you start out with. You know, the less you spread, the more successful you can really pinpoint focus and spend your time and energy and money and resources into this rather than spending money all over the place to try and find what works for you. If you're good at it, put your resources there, become extremely good at it, and then branch. I think that would be my biggest suggestion.
it's also kind of a bankroll thing too, right? Because like if you only have $600 to play with, well, your options might be you either buy one case or you can buy like 4 or 5 binder collections. So when your bankroll is only $600, maybe the best use of your money is buying those binder collections, breaking them down and grinding it out. Now, if you're already doing like a successful singles business and you have, 2 grand or something that you want to spend, that this set is doing really well. That Pokemon's not doing the wave system anymore. It's got popular Pokemon in an altar, and you want to take and put some money there or whatever. Like, yeah, I mean, you could try it and you might do well. You know what I'm saying? So it just, yeah, there's all different ways to go about it for sure. But you gotta find what works for you. So, yeah.
Yeah, and like I said, that's the point of this series is that people can see what you got to do to be in these certain niches. And it might give them a little bit more of a fast track into where they maybe want to be. None of us can really tell you where it is. You may get into it and you hate it, and that's a fact that it could be that way. But hopefully something like this, some kind of path video like this, could give you a perspective from each one, and you can say, yeah, I got $100,000 to spend in a Pokemon TCG. Maybe I need to go after the trophy cards or the snap cards and things like that are really expensive, but really they're constantly fluctuating up and down quite a bit because the people that are purchasing those have money. So they tend to sometimes move and flutter quite a bit. So you can see them come up on auction really cheap sometimes. And if you know the right person to sell them to, you could actually sell it to that person and potentially make some lucrative gains just because you understand that market. It's the same thing with sealed. Like you said, I'm starting out, I got $500. Can you start doing this business with $500? Yes. Just start buying binder collections. It's a simple way to get into it. It's a raw break down these binder collections, understand the pricing, try and get them under value, like a lot of us try and do when you're doing it. Purchase them for 20 or 30% under value, and then use that as your equity into the next binder collection. And before you know it, you continually just keep moving that up and get more of an account, more of an account, more of an account, and then you can go into the more sealed or graded or anything like that.
And it also, like, too, if it stresses you out, like if selling or trying to do it as a business stresses you out, don't do it. You know what I mean? Like you don't have to. Not everybody has to be super focused about the business side of it because it is stressful. It can be fun, but it is stressful, you know what I mean? And it is
Mm-hmm.
it is work. So if it stresses you out or makes you uncomfortable or whatever, like that's okay. You know what I mean? Like it's okay for you to just collect or do this passively and not be so focused on the finance, trying to time the market, trying to buy everything perfect down to the last dollar. Like that might be really stressful for some people, and that's
Yeah.
okay too. But
Yeah, it is. I mean, if it's not for you, then you don't have to do it. There's no one forcing you into this. And that's the nice thing is about a hobby is that you can try it and spend a little bit of money and see if it's something enjoyable. You don't have to spend $100,000. You can figure it out with a couple $100 if it's something you want to do. And if you don't, you can just move on. I mean, you can go to the next hobby or go to the next thing or whatever you want to do. There's no one forcing you or tweaking your leg into it with a hobby. It's not like you're making a lifelong commitment like a business or a full-time business or anything like that where you have to make money in order to pay your bills. And so that's why that alternative or that route for a lot of people isn't for them because better to go work a 9 to 5 and do this on the side than sometimes make the commitment where you can't get out of it. It's you got to do it to pay your bills. So, well, Nick, I've got everything that I could think of off of my list. We've made it through. Um, I give everybody an opportunity to have a little bit of free discussion if you'd like. So if you've got anything else you'd like to add, say, or bring up, we can do that now and go over that.
I guess the only thing I have to say, and thanks again for having me on, but I guess the only thing I would really say is now seems like a really a much more stable time to where I'm not so worried about things swinging 40, 50, 60% up or
Yeah.
down. It seems a lot more stable now. So like if you are somebody that's newer and you're trying to get footing, I feel like now it's a little bit easier to kind of get footing and see how the market moves because it's not as violent and volatile as it was in 2020 and 2021. So now is like a really good time to learn for people, you know what I mean? Because you're not going to get chances are you're not going to get burnt as bad. Like there isn't as much of a
Yeah.
risk, right? Like if you buy a card at 200, like it's not as much like 2021 to where that card could be like $40 the next week. You know what I mean? You
Yeah.
might get burned a little bit and you might lose 20 or $30 or whatever, but you're not losing like 80% of your initial investment like a lot of people unfortunately did buying at the peak. So for new people, like now's a great time, I feel. Just, and I don't know how you feel about that, but it just feels like the market's in a lot more relaxed
Yeah.
spot now, So
And I absolutely agree with that. I'm happy to see that we are still getting new people back into this hobby. Every day I'm seeing people on even my channel on Facebook and different areas of the hobby that are saying I'm new, just getting into it, or this is my first ETB. Should I open ETBs? But like you said, they're not coming into that volatile 2020, 2021, where, to be honest with you, a lot of us even just sat there and did very little to nothing in that time period. You know, Coming in 2019, 2020, I wish I had more time. And I told that to Dan. I said, I wish I had the time like he did from 2014 to build that inventory coming in. Because starting in 2019, the market was already starting to move in that upward direction, anyways. About that time, like I said, if you look at it, it was about the time that the tag team series started coming out. It kind of started going upwards at that point. Hidden Fates really kind of swung up the ramp a little bit and really started moving it into the Sword and Shield era. And then we had the whole thing happen with COVID and Logan Paul and everything just blowing this thing way up. And had I had more time, my inventory would have been quite considerably bigger to capitalize on that. But I can tell you that I think a lot of us that were in the investing market sold most of our stuff probably in October, November, and December of 2020, and we didn't do much. My money did not move very much unless it was something that I really, really wanted. Something that I wanted personally, and I was afraid that this was maybe one of a very few that I was going to see. But now, being in 2022, the market is more stabilized. There's time to think. You can look things over. You can write stuff out. You can run your numbers like you should, and you can be a lot more successful if you can do that and actually learn it versus just being trial by fire. Buy this, like you said, buy this single or this graded card today, and tomorrow I look at it and it's $100 cheaper than what I just bought it at 2 days ago. Whoa, how did that happen? Well, that's because some people prospected, bought it really high, it shot, and then nobody really wanted it, so then it just dumps out, and that's what we saw a lot of.
yeah, I think kind of like you said, and even I was talking to Josh earlier, and he's constantly saying like people on his whatnot stream, brand new people constantly
Mm-hmm.
coming in, and stuff that at this point, like a lot of people probably watching your channel are already relatively savvy, but you can get into this headspace to where like everything that you have learned, all the experiences, all the failures, all the mistakes, you can start to think that that's just common sense, and that's
Yeah.
that's not right. Like that's
No.
accumulation of all the experiences, all the
Mm-hmm.
successes, and all the failures that you've had over time that leads you to say, well, no, that's obviously not a good buy. But it's like to the new person coming in, they
No.
haven't been through what, you know what I'm saying? So that's not obvious. So right now is a good time, like I said, to kind of like learn, get your basics, get your building blocks and things like that without getting just completely wrecked, you know? So
Yes.
because that's not good for anyone. So
And that's why I thought this would be a good time to do this series. To be honest with you, I'm seeing a lot of new people, even on my channel. I'm getting comments all the time. I'm new to the hobby. I love your content. This is helping me. And to me, I would like to become a resource to get your bearings and get your understanding. And to do this, I want to say the proper way instead of just willy nilly throwing money everywhere and hoping something sticks. Because, like we said, you can't just sneeze now in 2022 and make money. It's back to a grind, it's back to work, and the faster you can understand these markets and the faster you can get into a niche, a hobby, or a section of it, the faster that you'll be able to be successful and put your resources where you need to put your resources rather than spreading your resources all over the place and hoping that you can find something that's glowing over here that's where I want to go. So, so yeah, like I said,
no,
that's oh, go ahead.
good spot to end it off, you think?
Yep, I think so. So, other than that, I'd like to just thank you. Of course, thank you for coming onto the channel. I want this series to continue, and this is a great resource for the grading side of things. Next person up, I'm either going to have Jake from Pokenomics or Ancient Mew is going to be joining me for the next part of this series. So we will either be going into the high-end collectibles or the raw buying and selling part of it. So definitely excited for either one that gets on. It gets a chance or opportunity to do this because they're both got some really good knowledge in the space. So, and like I said, thank you Retro for joining me tonight. Thank you for your time. This is a great resource for people that are joining this hobby. And like I said, if you got anything else you'd like to say before we shut her down.
No, man. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to watch the rest of the series, see all the other episodes, all the other people you have on. I'm excited to see them.
Yep, and we've got a couple other people I'm working with Echo based collectibles. I'm excited for that one. Like I said, I keep getting more and more people that are interested. Like you said, old school. He's going to be joining us now on the chat on this chat too. So we're going to get that perspective from the online, online breaker and kind of or store that way. So yeah, I mean, we're going to get some kind of really fun niche markets coming up. So definitely, if you guys are interested, keep in touch. We're going to keep moving this series along and try and cover as many niches as we can. And anybody who wants to join into this, of course, just hit me up with a message if you'd like to tell your story or give your perspective to this, because the more perspectives we can get, the better off that we can help people out on the direction that they may want to go. So, other than that, everybody, thank you for joining us today. And as always, we will see you next time here on Northwoods TCG.